and so we're now recording. And right, so how do you want me to start then, Stuart?
Well, just before you do, there's a couple of people here whose labels are not their real names.
No,
and if those people could open the chat and just tell me what their real names are, please, I can then change your label. So if you ask a question, Colin can say, "Oh, Roger."
I'm definitely not Alison, so I do apologise. That's my wife. So, but my name's Stuart, Stuart.
Okay, just bear with me.
No problems.
Hang on, sorry. So they get
Stuart, Stuart.
There we go. Right, there's Mr. Stuart. And then Mr. 776.
My name is Matt Clifford.
Matt. There you go, Matt. And then we have Galaxy A41.
He's Dave Aldred.
Okay, I'll change that.
One of the many Aldreds. The question is it the David Aldred that runs the Sixth Guard Tanks website, or is it another one of the David Aldreds?
It's the younger one who runs the
Excellent.
the Facebook page.
Brilliant.
Good
Dave's
stuff.
got a great website all about the whole of Six Guards Tank Brigade. Some really good stuff on there, so definitely worth looking at. Okay, so how do you want me to start?
Yeah, background for me, Colin, with work. Obviously don't know an awful lot about the book and how it comes to writing things like that. So a bit of background would be nice,
Okay, so this is the book, and it started off as a little 5-page booklet, part of a miniature war game background. I'm a tabletop war gamer, so we were always looking for interesting games to take to different shows with our wargaming. And as Tim knows, because he's played many of our weird and wonderful games at shows, some of them are very weird, and we're always looking for something a bit different. And I came across this action where you had some Churchill tanks punching their way through really, really close countryside, leaving their infantry behind, which is a sort of tactical no-no, getting onto their objective, and then being assaulted by German mobile anti-tank units that were designed to sort of shoot 3 kilometers away, and actually just driving through them, firing at the equivalent of point-blank range. And it was, as I say, so lots of things tactically completely wrong. But what it also meant was it was over a small area with a defined small number of vehicles involved, and we knew who'd been killed. So not only and wounded. So not only could we talk about the battle in terms of with the a historical aspect, but also we could introduce something that very rarely happens at wargaming shows, an aspect of remembrance, so that we could actually put some real names to the guys who didn't make it through the action. So that was what it was. That was the original thing, and then I had a phone call one day at work from one of Billy's predecessors, a guy called David Mabbott, to say that he got a chap in, a guy called Ian Findlay, with his dad, Peter Findlay, who was a Scots Guards veteran. And he knew I'd want to have a chat to him. So he put Ian on, And as Hugh has met Ian, who knows how long I can talk and how long Ian can talk, you can imagine how much that phone bill must have cost. But we had a good chat and we agreed to meet up the following year in Normandy. So we did. And me being me, Mr. Unsubtle, I suppose, chatting away and said, hope you don't mind me asking the question. I said, but I've walked the battlefield, I've had a look around the battlefield, I've had I've read a bit about it and I've war gamed it, but what was it really like? And the look of horror that went across this chap's face, and he just said, oh, sorry, son, I don't talk about it. And I thought, oh, shit, it must have been that bad. And it really impacted the look of loss that was still so fresh. So I decided I needed to do a lot more digging, which I did. And the following year I went back and I put together a bit more detailed booklet. And I sort of gave it to Peter and said, I hope you don't mind me giving you this. And he's had a look and he shares it around to people, and he comes up, as he's leaving, he comes up to me, puts his hand out and says, you'd better call me Muir, because that's what my friends do, because this is absolutely how it was, which was the start of a fantastic friendship. I was then invited by a guy called Malcolm Fleming to do a talk for the Berkshire, Buckinghamshire and Oxon branch of the Scots Guards Association about the battle. And as a result of that, I said, something I'd talked about, and I talked about it to Billy and the other guys at the museum. I said, it'd be nice to have some sort of small memorial. And so we decided to sort of see what we could do. And at the time, certainly what we were thinking was, like a small, like a grave marker, sort of, just a small, just something to recognise what had happened. Anyway, I happened to mention this at this event, and it got into the Scots Guards Association newsletter, and then it got Stefan, one of the vice presidents of the museum, started doing a lot of digging and moving things in France. And I then get a phone call from a guy called Major James Kelly, the adjutant of the Scots Guards, saying, believe you're involved in this new memorial that's going into Scots Guards. I think we should be involved as well. Can you tell me anything about it? So we sort of had a bit of a chat, sent him some information. And then this chap called Hugh Balfour got in touch with me. And where Hugh's really significant in this is in a couple of reasons. First of all, in 1941, his grandfather, Colonel Bill Balfour, reactivated the 3rd Battalion of the Scots Guards. And during the war, Hugh's father became adjutant briefly until I think it was until he was wounded, wasn't it, Hugh?
He was wounded in February 1945. He became adjutant in December, succeeding Vernon Erskine Crumb, but he'd been in the battalion, I think, since 1943. And obviously, I was fortunate in that I served for 7 years in the 1970s, and 12 of my contemporaries, or shortly after me, were sons of those who'd fought at this battle in 1944. So I had an intimate knowledge of many of them and of their fathers. The battalion had remained extremely close, both during and after the war. partly because they had much lower casualties than infantry battalions. And so they remained friends for the rest of their lives. And we all had a degree of sort of social knowledge of each other's families. Many of the officers were godfathers to their contemporary sons. And living in Scotland, I knew many of the soldiers who'd served in the battalion as well, particularly John Norrie, who was the head parking warden in Edinburgh. And I never got a parking ticket as a result.
How convenient.
So I felt it was appropriate to try and back this, and I wrote to all my contemporaries, who immediately offered large sums of money, of which the most prominent was Lord Elgin, who immediately came forth as he was one of the 4 survivors of the battalion still alive in 2019. I think back to you, Colin. I've said enough.
Yeah, thank you. So we decided that well, okay, if we're going to raise some funds, what were we going to try to create? So we decided a memorial, proper memorial. We would have a battlefield too. We'd have an event at the out in Normandy, and as a sort of almost a record of the day's events back in 1944, but also as a memory of the unveiling of the memorial and everything. We would have the book. And then I think Hugh and I were sort of regularly in contact, and to say that we started getting a little worried about the French end is a slight understatement, I think, because not much seemed to be happening. Not from Billy or from Stefan or Mark, but from the chap who was actually going to be cutting the memorial. And in fact, on the Thursday, what was really annoying was I was in France the week before, and we'd had 40-degree temperatures. On the Friday, the weather broke, and it was really grotty and drizzly. And I thought, oh, great, the nice weather could have stayed. But as it turned out, Saturday and Sunday weren't bad. But on the Thursday night, I went to see the stonemason to find that he'd not made a start on the orientation table. He'd marked out the main memorial, and he'd done most of the carving of the names on the other part of the memorial. So for those of you, let's see whether I can let's just actually no, let's do it that way. So that's the memorial, and the stone with the names on, and I realised that he'd spelt sergeant and corporal the French way. So this was a bit of a panic, but he was able to sort that. So on Saturday morning, went to the site. So he told us he would be there for 10:30, no problem. So the guys are still putting the stone out. 1 o'clock arrives, and eventually the 2 memorial stones appear. And at that point, I can sort of start to de-stress, I think, is the only, wow, I just lost the rest of the weekend, I think. And then on the Sunday morning at, I think it was 7:30 in the morning, the orientation table was laid, ready, so that when everyone arrived for 11 o'clock, we could, everything was there, and you wouldn't, a bit like the Battle of Waterloo, a damn close run thing. and it was a fantastic ceremony. We had Pipe Major there, accompanied by 2 braying donkeys, which we found quite amusing. We had about, I think it was about 60 family and associated Scots Guards family members were there. We had about, I think there's something like 125 people live in the village of Les Loges.
Colin, can I interrupt briefly and just say that none of this would have been the event it turned out to be had you not corresponded with the 80 or 90 people who'd volunteered to give money to the memorial appeal, and the enthusiasm, the battlefield tour which you mounted after the ceremony, but also the meet and greet which was conducted the day before by you in the Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery nearby. All of this, as well as your very clear knowledge of the battle, served to enthuse people, and really was extraordinary. 75 years after the event, how many people actually wanted to come. And that really was a tribute to the groundwork you've done and the very elaborate plans you laid, as well, of course, as the dinner the night before, where you gave a presentation on the lead up to the battle. So it was a tribute to the people who fought in the battle. It was also, if I may say, a great tribute to your knowledge and the enthusiasm you engendered in Scots Guardsmen.
Thanks for that, Hugh. Appreciate it. So it was like, well, when do we do the book? And I just kept on finding, because people kept on sending more stuff. So the plan was to try to get it completed by November. There was, in September, we had an event at the Scots Guards Club up in Edinburgh, where the Earl of Elgin unveiled a small commemorative plaque version of the main memorial. And then there was a similar event in November with the Duke of Kent, who is the colonel of the regiment, and Mr. John Graves, who sadly recently passed away. He unveiled that with the Duke of Kent. And but I had still not finished writing, but I'd got it more or less done, and we were just sort of doing the editing. And in some ways, I'm glad, because in the February, I was also then able to include in the book the Legion of Honour presentation to Ted Davison, who was one of the other surviving members of the 3rd Battalion. So it was sort of a long gestation period, some good fun research, and lots of beer and wine drunk, and food eaten, some good friends made, and I think the number of people that came to me afterwards who said to me, although we were aware of the unit that our father was in or our grandfather was in, we didn't know any of this because they never spoke about it. And I'd actually opened that up for them. And, you know, as an amateur historian, being able to take the equivalent of a jigsaw piece of someone's life and go to a family member, there's a little piece of your family history, and this is how it fits into his wartime life, was, you know, for me, really fantastic. And some people have even bought the book, Tim. But we sold 200, we had 200 copies done, which have all now gone. Just doing a couple of minor edits to get some others done. and because of a good deal I got on carriage and whatever, I've been able to donate the proceeds, the whole proceeds of the book of £600 to the Scots Guards Association charity, which I was really pleased about. And then as part of this, Stuart has donated another £100 into the charity as well, which is really great.
Colin, question for you.
Yes, Paul.
Inevitably, when you're writing a book, you have to say, right, that's it. I've got all the information I need. You say, right, that's it. Away we go. And then something else pops out of the ether. Has that happened in this case?
4 times.
Oh.
And still more happens. It's like, you know, one of the edits, there are 3 guys who were shown as casualties on the 1st of August. And it's like, well, were they killed in the battle, or were they killed after, or, you know, did they die of wounds? And it looks like that they weren't killed as part of the battle. And it was, well, who do we put on the memorial? And it was like, oh, do we put these on the memorial? You know, who do we include? And there was one very much I was like that, whether he should be on, but he wasn't on the original list from the Scots Guards War Diary. So again, I agreed with Hugh that that would be the definitive list. If someone says, oh, such and such a body should have been here, at least we can say, well, the list that we have used for the memorial was the list that is in the War Diary as being the casualties of that battle. And at least we got a bit of a leg to stand on, as it were.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying too that the war diaries weren't enormously accurate, in the sense that there were quite a few people who were in the battalion at the time who were detached either as reconnaissance troops or as support troops or liaison troops, whose names do not appear on the order of battle, but who were very definitely there. And in the Lane family, that I've certainly discussed, Hector Lane was there, but his brother Sandy was also there. And there will be quite a few other examples where in the heat of battle, people's presence was forgotten. So it was quite hard to make a proper judgment on this, but I think the line Colin took was the right one. It's the only way you could really do it. Otherwise, it would all be hearsay.
Yes. And the other thing that's in the War Diary is it shows that there are 4 troops plus a headquarters troop. However, at the time, the battalion had 5 troops, and we know that the other troops were there because one of the guys, one of the troop leaders who was killed, was from one of the troops that's not listed in the main part of the War Diary. You know, sort of, and I can understand, I suppose, sort of how things get missed, but it's incredibly frustrating. I suppose it'd be too easy if everything was perfectly ruled off and underlined and in a very nice, neat manner. Does that answer your question, Paul?
Sorry, yes, it does. Excellent, thank you very much. Presumably, is there space on the memorial for more if anyone else turns up, or is that it?
No, I think we would leave it as it is. I think it was done with the best information that we had at the time. I don't think the way he's set them out, I don't think there's space for any more. and you have to, because of the rigor we've gone into it, then I think adding others unless we got really strong cast iron constructive evidence to the contrary.
No, I mean, battles obviously, as you know, they're very transitory events, so I'm presumably you're only talking about a few hours, if that. And obviously you've researched who was there and when they were there and so on, and I'm sure you've done your absolute best. So it would be unfortunate if somebody else turns up, who, you know, another name turns up, but
Yeah.
I think that's most unlikely from what you've said anyway.
Yeah, I think also there are now only 2 living survivors. There were 4 when this was done. We're down to 2 now. One of whom's an officer, and Ted Davis. Everybody else is now dead. I think it would be very difficult to verify something. And the memorial is there. It tallies with all the paperwork, and I think we should regard it as a done deal.
Yeah. But it's a significant memorial even compared to some of the other memorials that are in Normandy. I mean, it is a large piece of, well, 2 large pieces of granite set out like the open pages of a book, and then above, looking out across the battlefield, an orientation table which is about 1.5 meters by 1 meter, and that's got a map of the action, and then also the general Operation Bluecoat, and where that ended up, and then where 6th Guards Tank Brigade went for the rest of their war. So it's a significant piece of architecture in the landscape. It's at the picnic area for the local village. I think the other thing which I hadn't thought of at the time, but the more subsequently, I think it's almost, and Billy might be able to comment on this, it's almost as though it's given the village, which was sort of the village of Les Loges, it was, I'd say, a very small hamlet, it's almost given them something to be really proud of again, because they offered the land to be used. You know, they said, if you want to have the memorial here, we'll clear this. They've cleared all the land. They've given that freely to the memorial, and I think it's given them almost a purpose back. Would you say, Billy? Don't know whether he's going to be able to.
Right. Yes. Les Loges is really a small village on the, as Colin say, haven't really anything really interesting around. And I think, as you say, it makes something really interesting for the tourism and the people around there to go just above the village to see the battle, how it started and what happened around there.
Billy's the president of the museum at Saint Martin de Bessas, which focuses on Operation Bluecoat. I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, Hugh.
Colin, can I just add, one of the things that happened on the night before is we had 10 members of families from the village or the next door village to dinner. And I sat next to a lady who, at the end of dinner, gave my wife sort of said, "Thank you for coming." And she said, "No, thank you for coming." And I said, "Well, we've just come." She said, "No, I don't mean you. I mean your father and his friends. You were the people who liberated us from 4 awful years." And she'd spent the evening graphically describing what it was like to have 5 German soldiers living in your house. for when she was a small child at the time. But the sense of liberation that occurred as a result of this battle for the two villages immediately adjacent to it was very palpable. And I think it would be appropriate too to pay credit to particularly the Coldstream and Grenadier battalions who are part of this brigade, because they actually sealed the triumph by capturing the high ground to the right of where the Scots Guards were. And it was the commanding officer of the Coldstream Guards who took the initiative when he saw all of this happening and advanced very boldly onto the neighboring hill. He was promoted to brigadier as a result of this and was then killed 2 weeks later. And there is a memorial almost identical to this one, made of the same stone, which we copied. So it was a brigade triumph as well as a Scots Guards one. But it was the liberation of the two villages that was as much part of this celebration as the battle itself.
And that's something I've noticed when I've been in Normandy, the reaction of especially the elder French and towards veterans who you know, they sort of remodeled their you know, their houses and that with high explosive, and you know, totally destroyed the way through. But there's that, you know, and it's something we will never know. That sort of thankfulness, I suppose, is as good a word as any. But no, it was great. It's been great to be a part of. It's been fun.
Another question for you, Colin.
Yes, Paul.
Has the landscape around the memorial changed a great deal from what it was when the action took place?
Massively. Apart from the fact that the French have driven a motorway through the battlefield, they've also grubbed out a lot of the bocage hedging, just for more efficient use of the landscape. And in the book, there's a couple of photographs where you can see from the start point of the battle to where you're going, and you sort of squinting and you think, well, that's a tough spot. And we did this on the battlefield tour. We started by just south of the town of Caumont, where you can look across and you can see where the field, the objective is. And then when you realise that a good 50% of the bocage hedging will have been ripped out, and that's left is a lot tidier than it was back then. You know, with sort of, you know, because can't have people having the cars scratched around the as they drive round. So it's a lot tidier, it's a lot neater. Though Willie Whitelaw's daughter, when we were talking, she said that they'd only ever gone back once. And she says, we were stood on the hill. She says, and my father's there sort of lording it over. She says, and I remember went, and that's where our tanks came through. I see the French haven't replaced the bloody hedges, which she thought was quite amusing.
Colin, I think it's worth remarking that bit because it was quite a funny moment. But the reason why the battle was a success, in fact, the whole advance was a success, was that the Churchill tank was capable of surmounting the ditches and hedges that make up the bocage whereas the Sherman tanks in, I think it was 43rd Wessex Division next door, got completely stuck and got really left behind. And it was the reliability of the Churchill, as well as its superior engine size and performance, that enabled this battle to be won, in contrast to others.
You're right. I think if I just share my screen, if it'll work. So this is a photograph from the museum. The three links on the left-hand side are, excuse me, links from a Churchill tank, and the little small one there is a link from a Sherman tank. So first of all, you've got a heck of a lot more grunt grabbing into the undergrowth, because the Churchill tank was actually designed for almost World War I style battlefields. If then just bear with me. We've got them. There we are. And there we are. So if again I share this website, so this is a top-down view and a front-on, side-on of a Sherman tank. So you can see the tracks come right to the edge of the end of the hull. But if I go on to this one, which is the Churchill tank, hopefully there'll be a vertical one. Why isn't there ever there we are. So with the Churchill tank, the tracks, although they've got track covers, the tracks are forward of the body, and therefore there was enough grip that the tank could literally drive itself at the hedge and then climb up and over, rather than with the Shermans. They just couldn't do that until much later, when they'd had this American Sergeant Cullen came up with this idea of chopping up all Rommel's beach obstacles and welding them to the front of the tanks, and using that as a way of breaking through the thick hedges. Because the bocage hedges is basically, you've got I don't know how many of you've been to Normandy. If you've not, if you've been to Devon or Cornwall, so you've got a little narrow lane. The banks go up above, and then the trees and the bushes grow out of those hedges, and the fields are actually usually above road level as well. So it's a proper sunken, overgrown little lane, and some of the terrain they had to fight the way through was appalling. I think is I think I've got a why is it?
Colin, the picture that was painted of the tanks coming through, that's a very good illustration.
Yes.
Terence Cuneo picture.
Yes. If you just bear with me.
And while you're looking for that, my father's letters particularly record the suppressive power of the two machine guns on the Churchill tank, which he basically said we raked every hedge from end to end with machine gun fire. Any building was blitzed with the main 76-pound main armament, so that the effect of these very powerful machines, although not obviously in the same league as the German Tigers and Panthers, but the effect on the on the defending infantry was very clear, and in subsequent battles, the German prisoners mentioned that. But
Yeah.
Colin, if you found that picture.
Yeah, I have. I've just, and I'll just do. So hopefully we can all see that. This tank is meant to be Lochinvar, which is Robert Runce's tank, who became Archbishop of Canterbury.
Yeah, and you can see the Germans sort of, although they're very close, the effect of these machine guns coming through the hedges was pretty catastrophic. I do remember vividly in the 1970s when the 1st Battalion was based in Germany, in Munster, and we had this picture and the one of Lord Lisle winning his VC in the North African desert, where he's charging into a gun pit, an 88 gun pit, with his pistol drawn and his bayonet drawn, and there's dead Germans in every direction. And we were told we had to entertain a neighboring battalion from the Bundeswehr 191 Panzer Grenadiers. And the officers came into our officers' mess and they saw these two pictures, and you could visibly see their jaws dropping open with astonishment at the sort of the mayhem that British infantry and tank battalions were wreaking on their enemies.
Mm. I mean, the whole point about the Churchill tank was initially was a bit of a disaster, but because of its design and the fact it was quite low geared, it could get places that no one expected tanks to get to. And the saving of the Churchill tank was actually Longstop Hill out in Tunisia, where the Germans had defended this hill and had not worried about the one approach because it was too tough for anything. Heard this clanking noise as these Mark III Churchill tanks came over, and apparently the one German commander decided it was rather unsporting to come up a hill that's unclimbable. But there you go.
I think the key thing on that, Colin, was my uncle happened to be there. He was a Grenadier Guardsman, and he obviously witnessed the whole thing. And he said what was fascinating was that the German 88s couldn't depress their barrels low enough to take on the Churchills, and they said the sort of panic that suddenly hit the Germans when these things breasted the hill, too close, too late, couldn't do anything and fled.
Yeah. I mean, sort of, there might have been slow and lumbering, but the shock and awe, I suspect. Just go through a few photos of sort of teed up. This was Lord Elgin unveiling the memorial in the Scots Guards Club, and at the end of the battlefield tour, Hugh presented me with my own version of this, which is in pride of place downstairs. This is just a schematic. I've just pulled a few photos out from the book of where I think the units were based. But you can see here, the main reason for showing this is you get an idea of the size of the fields and how overgrown parts of this part was quite open at this. I found highly amusing. It's in the wardrobe just to show, I suppose, that guards have humour. And it says, the small advanced part, several vehicles inevitably went, this is when they're meeting up. Several vehicles inevitably went astray, and an aged Frenchman was heard to say to a guardsman, "Où est le bloody Scots Guards?" And what I find highly amusing about that is it's been grammatically correct, or the grammar has been changed from, to make it read properly. I just thought that that says something about the view. And this is from Caumont. So here we've got the objective of Hill 226, and there's Hill 309, which Hugh mentioned. And as you can see, even today, we've no smoke from bombs or whatever. That's still quite difficult to be able to point out. That shows just a schematic of the actual battle. Just I see the pipe major on the Friday evening. Was this lady you were talking about, Hugh?
I think it was, yes, because that's me on the beside her.
Yes, because
she spoke only French, so we were
yes,
lucky.
I think that's Michelle. Sorry. Oh,
Was she the mayor's wife?
Jeanette.
Say again, Billy. It's Jeanette Menard, isn't it?
It's Jean Menard wife.
Yeah, so she's the wife of Jean Menard, who started the museum. This is, again, the plaque at the Guards Wellington Barracks with John Graves and the Duke of Kent. This is we believe, the Churchill tank, or what was left of the Churchill tank of the battalion's second in command. Took a frontal hit from an 88, and the turret went up and flipped down. Pretty catastrophic damage.
Yes, I just add, he was called Sidney Cuthbert, and my father had enormous regard for him and said he was the second in command and was responsible for much of the training of the battalion and its battle readiness. And he was obviously very unlucky to be killed, but it does show the devastating power of the 88mm gun on the German Jagdpanthers. And I mean, when you think that 3 Jagdpanthers knocked out 16 tanks from one squadron, or 13 tanks, I forget, you'll know the precise things, but you know, if the Germans had followed up, this might not have been the battle we were commemorating. It might have been something the other way around.
Well, the problem was, I think, they then realised that left flank were down at the bottom of the hill and right flank were at the other part of the hill, and they suddenly realised that they were slightly outnumbered. And so they disappeared off. This is a different operation, but this is a Churchill tank coming through Bocage. So you can see here what it was, the sort of thing it would look like. It's just a little sketch map of the map. This is the sort of wartime map that the British Army went into battle with, which were based upon French maps and aerial photographs. The frustrating thing is that the current French maps have a different grid system, which is really annoying. And that's
Colin, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I do remember Claude Dunbar, commanding officer Jeremy Fletcher's father-in-law, remarking that the thing that was really helpful were the aerial photographs.
Yes.
And that they were the key to actually making the progress they had, and the maps weren't a hell of a lot of use.
Well, this is the, I think, or reproduction of the map, effectively the aerial photographs map that Colonel Dunbar had, because apparently it was the only sort of in the the close countryside, it was the only chance they got of actually working out where they were. You can see it's quite, I mean, there's some open stretches, but these lines look, quite neat, and but they'd be all overgrown, and of course you've then got people shooting at you as well, which probably focuses attention. This is the memorial, so at the unveiling. So this is Major Kelly laying the wreath. This is him just reading the collect and the we will remember them act of remembrance. And then here we have the Mrs. Jo Levert, who is the mayor of Les Loges, and Douglas Erskine Crum, Brigadier retired Douglas Erskine Crum, whose father was the adjutant during the battle.
Just worth remarking, Nigel Beeson, who's the second name down, his family came, and they were very moved when they found the spot where he'd been killed. And it was the people there whose ancestors, so to speak, had fallen, were as much responsible for making this the occasion it was. I think, and was it Andrew or Alec Hay?
Andrew Hay.
Andrew Hay.
Mary Treadgold.
Was it his niece who was there?
Yeah, Mary Treadgold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, when we went to the Commonwealth War Graves the day before to the cemetery, it was beautifully laid out, and it was very moving to see people who had never been to their fathers or uncles' graves.
Mm. Yes, and I think that was for me. I think the extra bit was that this wasn't just a memorial, a new memorial that had gone in, but it was actually a memorial that meant something personally to the vast majority of people that were there. And I think that just added something a little bit more. I've just realised that we've got 2 Scots Guard stars, but they're not on those. Hopefully, they're there now, aren't they, Billy?
Yes, they have put there just after.
Yes, yes. So as you can see, this is the Marbrier, the chap that carved it all, and this is Stéphane Jacquet, who's the vice president, who was one of the driving forces on the French side. And this is the orientation table. So over in the distance here, you've got the town of Caumont, which is up here on the memorial. As you can see, it's a fantastic piece of artwork, let alone anything else, the way that he's been able to replicate.
It describes, apart from the battle, it describes the whole advance of the brigade through the rest of France, as far as on the top right, wasn't that it?
So we've got on the left is everything down to taking the hill. The right hand top map is Operation Blue Coat in its entirety, and then the smaller map is out of the history of the 6th Guards Tank Brigade, and it shows the 6th Guards Tank Brigade throughout the Northwest Europe campaign. Obviously, we have the memorial. This is myself and Muir Finlay. This is you can see the other thing with a Churchill tank is it's actually lower than a Sherman tank. This is one on top of Hill 112 in Normandy. I knew the veteran who did the fundraising to get this here, and there's a 25-pounder field gun now and a statue, and I think you've been instrumental in providing some links and ideas for the continued fundraising there, Hugh. But you can see it's a fair beast. But when you look at Muir, I mean, he's 6 foot tall. They're putting guardsmen in tanks doesn't actually seem a logical idea because of the size of them. So, how's that been? Was that what you were hoping for, Stuart?
Yeah, well, from my point of view, Colin, obviously what you make of the book on the site, you can give back to the Scots Guards Association. So whatever money you make, give back to the Scots Guards, no problem, because obviously it's fantastic what you've done. So obviously we'd like to continue in the vein we start. We give like £100. Obviously, what the book makes, I'm happy for you to give it back to the Scots Guards. So no problem. Obviously, we might be able to sell a couple more copies as well. So hopefully, you know, we can make a bit more money for the association. So. A little known fact by on, I actually served 9 months with the Scots Guards in 1991, Operation Banner. So under Colonel Spicer. So I know, so to sort of don't tell you what, you know, obviously, but as part of the infantry brick is in Northern Ireland. So and so you know, so I know the Scots Guards quite well. So you know, so 9 months with them on Op Banner in 1991. So but. Under Colonel Tim Spicer, so I don't know if you know you, Tim Spicer.
Yes, I know him.
Yeah, he's
yeah,
nice man, but good to see how, you know, very looked after his troops very well, you know. So I know there was a bit of a hoo-ha with him with the boy he went on to do after the Scots Guards, but I found him a very nice man, you know. So to speak as I find is Hugh. So
has anyone got any final questions? And have you found it interesting?
yeah, very interesting, Colin. Very interesting.
Colin, can I ask what first attracted you to the battle as a sort of from a wargaming perspective?
Because it was totally wrong. It was totally wrong. You've got tanks going forward, leaving their infantry behind because they couldn't keep up through the heavy countryside, but they realised that if they pushed on, they would still get the benefit of the rolling artillery barrage. So we could work our way through. So, you know, and because they had trained extensively with the 15th Scottish Division and Scots Guards specifically with the 2nd Argyll and Southern Highlanders, they always looked at them as being their infantry. So, you know, in the war diary, it says, you know, we went on because we knew our infantry would catch us up. So you've got infantry going through tanks going through thick countryside against, you know, dug-in infantry, possibly anti-tank guns and whatever. They get on their objective. It's a fairly open objective, and you then have self-propelled guns instead of sitting back. And in fact, Charles Farrell, who at the time was commanding left flank, he actually said if the Jagdpanthers hadn't left where they were and had just acted as mobile anti-tank guns should have done, then they would have probably made just as much of a mess of certainly left flank as well as what happened to S Squadron. But they didn't. They actually came through. So it's that you've got turreted, you've got self-propelled guns with a fixed gun attacking turreted tanks at close range. You've got tanks going through close countryside without infantry support. So everything was tactically wrong, and it was a nice small battle. So even without stretching range too much, you could do it on an 8x4 or 8x6 tabletop, and you could do the whole battle. Or at least, you know, the main part, obviously you couldn't do the approach, but the main battle. And so it sort of, and it was a bit different. And then, as like I said, because we knew who the casualties were, we could actually use it as a remembrance activity. So I used to be involved with the Scouts, and we used to go to, I'd do a remembrance activity. I'd take some of my tanks or whatever, and down to Cubs and to Scouts, and we'd have a bit of fun, and then we'd do remembrance. And I took this game down to the Explorer Scouts, which are like the 14 to 18-year-olds, and that had a great time playing the game. And then I started explaining what really happened, and you could see changing their approach. And I think it started because they were finding more detail out. It actually meant something, I think. So it's all of those. Bless you, whoever that was. All of those combined made it an interesting battle to do, and we still do it on a regular basis.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Colin, I'm afraid I've got to leave, but I enjoyed it very much. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for your support, Hugh.
Colin, I just about to say one thing. I'm probably not a military expert, but it seems like very much like a modern Charge and Light Brigade, doesn't it? Really, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
So, you know, hopeless.
More like the Charge of the Heavy Brigade, really. But
yeah, obviously, but you know,
given the size of the tanks, but yeah, it was a real. And the other point about it was because of this battle. The reason why the Jagd Panthers were there were 43rd Division on the left flank, because they were being supported by Sherman tanks. They weren't anywhere near where they should have been, because they should have flushed these out. And so Scots Guards were told to stay where they were, and Coldstream came round onto Hill 309. But what that did was it punched a hole through the German defences, and then became the Guards unit became a very, very solid barrier to German counterattacks. And at the same time, on their right flank, it allowed the 11th Armoured Division to work through and capture or liberate St. Martin de Bassas, and then from there on to Beni-Bocage. And it was the start of a huge British breakout operation. And what's really, really frustrating is there are, and I think a lot of the reason is because Montgomery didn't really mention it much in his memoirs. There are a lot of people that aren't aware of the battle.
Yeah.
You know, in the whole of Operation Bluecoat, not just this little bit. So, I mean, in his book on Normandy, his latest one, James Holland, he gets it all wrong. Apparently, according to him, Coldstream took 309 on the 30th, and it wasn't until the 31st that Scots took 226. Well, just read the war diaries. You know, and I suspect that just could be, you know, sort of somebody else doing his research for him and not.
He's fantastic, I think, personally. You know, I said, you know, whatever we can do to help out, make more money for the Scots Guards Association, more than happy to help, you know. So obviously, you know, we'll try and get a few more copies of your book sold, you know, go from there. But all money goes back.
Well, like I say, I'm getting. I've got a few little edits. Mm-hmm. Most of them is you know, I've done things like. I've got a, you know, I've got a, you know, I've missed a word out or something stupid. So it's not a major re-edit. It is, but it's sort of minor details. But that'll be going off hopefully next week. So I shall be ordering another watch of those and available for sale from me.
Oh, we're going to advertise on the website, you know, we've only got 81 people on it, but obviously we've got avenues to other groups as well. So obviously, so, you know, obviously, you know, we can sort of try and get a few copies sold. So all proceeds go back towards you.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to do that, no problem, you know, so.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Right. So if no one's got any more questions, I would like to say thank you very much for supporting this. It's the first thing. I say Stuart approached me and said, yeah, I didn't want to do a Q&A, and we'd not, I think this is your first one as well, hasn't it, Stuart?
Yeah.
And
Baptism by fire,
more of an A than a Q, but
yeah, baptism by fire, Colin, I think so. But it's been good. It's been fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No, thank you, and good to see you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you.
Right, I shall end this now, and hopefully then the recording will, and I'll be in touch about the recording.
Okay, thanks, Colin.
Just save the chat. And